And I started to discover these things about Christianity that were blowing my mind, that truly convinced me of its truth. These are things like the fact that the Old Testament prophecies about Jesus that were written hundreds of years before Jesus ever existed were fulfilled by Jesus. And we have the manuscripts of those older texts that were written way, way before it happened. So that's interesting. There's lots of prophecies like that in the Bible. Welcome to the Masculine Spirit Podcast, where we discuss masculine development, spirituality, and potential from a Christian perspective. I'm Robert Krause, and I'm joined by my co-host, Noah Bills. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a shorter episode, kind of one-off special episode.
Christmas special.
Yeah, Christmas special, pretty much. We're going to be sharing our personal testimonies and discussing the power of reflection. So, before we get into that, just a verse to share in relation to those topics. 1 Peter 3:15. In your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. We're going to be trying to do that, trying to kind of outline the experiences that we both went through to get to where we are today, and for our faiths to get to where they are today.
Provide some personal insights and hopes it is relatable or something that can be learned from.
That's what we hope for. Hopefully you guys can find something valuable in that. So I'll get right into it. I was born in Fort Bragg, California on November 7th, 1999. To a loving family, loving mom and dad.
Mom, pa.
My mom worked as an occupational therapist, and she still works as an occupational therapist. My dad at the time was a police officer, and he's now retired. So yeah, that's what I was kind of growing up with. My family only stayed in Fort Bragg for about 2 months after I was born. And then we came over to Woodland, which also happens to be where Noah is from as well. Woodland is another small city in California, just about 15 minutes outside of Sacramento. Yeah, my childhood was very pleasant. Had a lot of friends. I was very into like Legos and such. I would also go camping a lot with my family. Camping was a big part of my childhood. I don't know about you, Noah. Was that something you and your family did?
We camped on occasion, but I was not a huge fan of camping.
Oh, for sure.
To an extent, I still am not a huge fan of camping, but it is nice.
Dude, no way. I'm definitely going to be taking you on some camping trips in the near future.
You already have.
Well, we don't have to talk about that one. Camping was a big thing for me. We would go on these camping trips with our church friends, and their kids would come along, so I would be playing with them, like exploring the woods, going down the river, swimming in lakes, that kind of stuff, which is definitely something that stuck with me up until now. Like, I still love camping. I love going on hikes. I love exploring nature, So yeah, my early childhood, I'd say from the beginning up until maybe 6th grade, maybe 5th grade, there's not a ton to talk about. Like,
5th grade is when we met.
5th grade is when we met. So, I mean,
so that's when
my life started. But no, my life up until then was there weren't really many challenges that I faced. I was pretty well-behaved kid overall. I was having a good time.
Pretty stable.
Yeah, it was stable. My family was stable. My parents were doing well. My little brother was born in 2004, so he was 5 years younger than me. And yeah, we had a pretty good relationship too. I definitely gave him a hard time sometimes, but that's how it is. Um, yeah, so I guess we can fast forward to 5th grade when I met Noah. It is worth mentioning that before I got into 5th grade, I was going to a private Christian school, Woodland Christian School. Yeah, for what that is worth. I started my school journey with that. So then I was transitioning into the public school system in 5th grade, and I met Noah. I met a bunch of other people, some of which I'm still friends with today.
Some good people for sure.
Yeah, I had a good experience in public school. At least for the first couple of years. It was a good experience overall, but yeah, the first couple of years were not too many problems. I was definitely introduced to some more worldly things, as you might expect. These were the first times that I was exposed to porn, to smoking, to not in 5th grade, but
I mean, you started
maybe
crack in 6th grade, so
maybe like 7th grade or so, I was exposed to these things, not necessarily participating, but exposed. So yeah, you had some of those new thoughts going around in my head. Yeah, then I would say getting into middle school is where things escalated a little bit more. I transitioned to Douglas Middle School, 7th grade, and it was around this time that unfortunately I was really I started watching porn much more heavily. I did have a lot of good friends. Like, I was always a pretty sociable kid. I would say I was on the quieter side, but like still got along well with people. Didn't have too many issues at school with like bullying or anything like that. A few instances, but not too much. But yeah, I remember the first time that I discovered porn. Well, it was actually a slippery slope. Like, I was on my parents' computer.
it is quite slippery.
Quite slippery. I was on my parents' computer, which is like this desktop computer that is out in the open, but it's like upstairs.
Right outside everybody's bedrooms.
Yeah, right outside the bedrooms, but everybody else was downstairs, and obviously, volume was off, all that stuff. So yeah, it started with me like looking up more innocent images, like sexualized images or whatever. But then I think everybody has that moment where they see that one link that they click on that just teleports them into this cacophony of sexual images that a child, I mean, no one should be seeing them, but especially a child should not be seeing, because it's not really something that you can deal with properly at that age. And since that day, or from that day forward, for many weeks, I just, every day when I got home from school, I would just figure out how I could access it again. So the masturbation side of things like came in a little bit later. It wasn't like I just immediately started doing that. It was more like a habit that formed slowly. And yeah, that was something that followed me into high school and affected me in a lot of different ways. There's obviously the fact that I wanted to hide it from people was like, it made me feel a little bit shameful. Like there was something, part of myself that I needed to keep secret from the world. And I knew it was wrong from the start. Like, I definitely knew. And it's kind of like the more that you do it, the more that you're aware that you know that it's wrong. But it's very, very tempting, very neurochemically addictive behavior to get into. So anyways, going into high school, that was a serious struggle that I was struggling with. But back into middle school, this would be where I think I started to have some struggles as far as like socially interacting with people. I felt like I was pretty awkward, especially in 8th grade. I remember like, asking a couple girls out and like getting rejected a couple times. And
You were asking girls out in 8th grade, dude? I didn't know you were a player like that.
I was trying, bro.
Interesting. Just a quick question. When you talk about awkwardness, are you talking about like with like people you didn't know super well? Because I never really pegged you. I mean, I knew you like pretty well ever since like elementary school. Never really pegged you for super awkward. Are you talking about just like around people you didn't know as well, or like new people, or do you feel like you're just awkward in general all around?
Well, this is an interesting point because I would have these images in my head of how people were perceiving me, and probably 90% of the time, I don't think it was true. But no, like even my social anxiety got so bad that even around my good friends, like you and other people, even around my family, I would be judging myself, thinking about ways that people are judging me just for the way that I'm talking, for like how I'm standing, how I'm walking. The simplest, like smallest things I would criticize myself for in my head.
Yeah, I was also criticizing you for those things.
Hey, it's good to know that it wasn't all in my head. That's
Yeah. It
at
was all
least it's
real. It was
justified.
real.
I think the seeds of those feelings started in middle school, but kind of grew even more in high school. So yeah, I was dealing with that social anxiety. I was dealing with porn addiction at that time. Towards the end of middle school, I had had a couple of rejections from girls, and then I have these feelings where like I see certain guys that do have girlfriends. I feel like I'm just like missing out. I'm behind. I'm not at the same level, don't have the same status as those guys. So that was something that I struggled with for a while. Yeah. Otherwise in middle school, it was a pretty good experience. I don't want to make it seem like I just had these crippling anxieties around me all the time, but that was the time that it started.
Origins.
This is my origin story. This is my villain arc. So going into high school, I was dealing with all those things, and in high school, this is where I really started getting into drinking, getting into weed and stuff like that. So that added another layer of neurochemical changes as well as potential for abuse and addiction with these things. Yeah, but I had really good friends. Unfortunately, I did feel very anxious around them, and I was judging myself quite a bit for things that probably weren't real. But I would end up manifesting them. I would go into a social situation, could be as simple as like talking to some friends at lunch, and because I was thinking about the ways that I could like mess it up before I even got into the situation, I would end up like stuttering or just not communicating what I wanted to communicate, or feeling like other people domineered the conversation when I wanted to like get a word in. And it, ultimately, it's hard to admit, but it built up to like a lot of resentment in me. I had resentment towards a lot of people because dealing with that anxiety, it just kind of builds up and builds up, and the temptation is to want to blame other people for that, which I did for a long time. That's probably one of the worst like pitfalls that I've fallen into, because when you blame other people, you're removing yourself from the solution. You're saying, I don't have control over this. These other people have control over this.
Exactly. When in reality, you had complete control over it, but you're letting your anxieties and worse inhibitions take the reins.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a hard thing because what are you supposed to do in that situation? Are you supposed to like just tell yourself, stop being anxious? Like, why are you being so anxious? I felt like
Gaslight yourself.
there was a long time in my life where like every morning I would wake up, I'd be like, all right, you know what? I'm just gonna be like chill today. I'm not gonna worry about what other people are thinking. I'm just gonna relax and like be myself. But then as soon as I was thrown into those social situations, it's like all of that just went out the window. I wasn't able to hold it together. I'm like doing things to try to impress people. It's tough. And it was like that for many years. Um, as far as the substance abuse side of things, I drank a little bit. I was never addicted to alcohol, but weed, on the other hand, that was a something that I got into later in high school and definitely became like the center of my life for close to 2 years, maybe. Part of that being my senior year, and
I remember that year.
I would hope you remember. There's some
We
good
smoked a
memories in
lot
there.
during that. We smoked a lot during that year.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Getting into smoking weed and that kind of thing, that got me exposed to a lot of other people that I wouldn't have necessarily hung out with before, because when you're a high school student, you only have a certain amount of connections to get your supply, if you know what I'm saying. I would gravitate towards people that maybe I didn't like or didn't get along with super well, but since I was able to go get weed with them, they had a plug or whatever, I would end up hanging out with them. And yeah, some of those people really like did not treat me well. And because of my low self-esteem at the time, like I didn't really know how to stand up for myself that well. It got better over time. But yeah, I remember just feeling like taken advantage of in certain situations and feeling pressure to hang out with people that I didn't really want to hang out with. But because since smoking weed was what I wanted to do, there were certain people that I ended up hanging out with.
To sell your body for the tree, dude. It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
You got to sell your time and your hangouts with these people just so you can get a hit off them. Like, oh, bro, you got weed? Ah, yeah, I would love a hit of that, dude. Oh, really? Thanks. For free? Really? Thank you, man.
It's not even trying to get free stuff. It's just like people that have connections for me to buy whatever I was trying to
Yeah,
buy.
just maintaining the connections to get what you want.
Yeah, exactly. This period of my life kind of culminated in this experience where I was pretty depressed, and I was feeling depressed, and I felt like I wanted to express that to my parents. So I ended up telling my dad. I kind of broke down crying in the moment, which is crazy for me because I like never cry. Before that time that I cried, the last time was probably like, I don't know, like 4 years before that or something.
I cry like once every 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, after that happened, my family was obviously concerned. So they suggested that I go see a psychiatrist, all that kind of stuff. I was talking to a therapist, whatever. Eventually the psychiatrist ends up prescribing me something. It was an antidepressant. So I take that for couple months or so. It's supposed to take like 4 or 5 months before it really starts to have an effect. So I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll try this. Didn't really do anything for me whatsoever. I felt like it was a placebo or something. It just, yeah, I literally noticed no effect from that medication. And then in my meetings with my therapist, I would feel like we would discuss stuff, but there would never be like any solution to things. And I'm a very solution-oriented person. I like to look at problems and just be like, okay, what's the next step? Like, what are we doing now? What are we doing? But yeah, I just felt like I was going to talk to someone to like let out my feelings, and that was it. And I was like, okay, so this medication isn't working. This therapist is like nice, but they're not really helping me with the things that I need help with. And yeah, and then funnily enough, this is when working out became a significant part of my life, because I was like, okay, if these things that I'm trying are not helping me, maybe if I am just consistent with working out for once in my life, maybe I'll start to feel better. That was like my thought process.
Are you talking about like weightlifting, or are you referring to like the sports you did in school?
Weightlifting. So yeah, previous to this, I had done a track and field in school. I had done Taekwondo like a long time ago when I was a kid, but I never had like a personal habit of exercising myself. I would go through these different phases where I would like try to run every morning, or I would try to like do some push-ups and some sit-ups every morning, but it just never lasted. So yeah, at this point I'm probably like, what, like 18, maybe 17, 18, 17, something like that. And yeah, I decided that I'm going to be serious about working out. So I start working out at my home. I'm doing like some calisthenics stuff and with like little dumbbells that my dad had. I would run a little bit. I would do some pull-ups, maybe some dips or whatever. And yeah, working out was the first thing that I noticed that actually made a dent in my depression and my anxiety. And I was like, oh, this is real. This is something tangible that I can do to improve it. So I got really into it. I was very consistent. I'm still, pretty consistent with that. It's a important part of my life. But yeah, that was kind of the step. I view fitness as the step for me to get from where I was to where I'm going, and like ultimately to like find my purpose. Not that fitness is my purpose or is such a amazing thing, but like there's real power in it. And if you're a person who struggles with depression or anxiety or anything like that, I think that fitness can probably help you out a ton.
The confidence boosts you get from doing physical activities and seeing yourself grow and develop and change for the better is immeasurable to me. I have a similar testimony as well. I think it's something like that definitely makes a lot of change positively in your life.
Yeah, yeah. And then it's also worth mentioning that at this point I had stopped taking the antidepressants. I just like didn't see any purpose in it, so I stopped that of my own volition. And yeah, so graduated high school, still smoking a little bit at this point. I was going into community college at Woodland Community College. At first, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, so I was just taking my general education courses, that kind of stuff. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to go to nursing school, which ended up happening, but that's a spoiler. So yeah, when I was in community college, I would say that I was gaining confidence. I didn't nearly have the confidence that I have now, but yeah, I was feeling better in who I was and was actively trying to improve myself. At this point, with the porn and stuff, I was still engaging with it, but not nearly as much. I wasn't as taken by it. So that was a good thing. I was making a little bit of progress there. I was making progress in the gym. I wasn't smoking as much, but still a little bit. And then I ended up getting into nursing school at Simpson University, which is a private Christian school, which is also where I happened to meet my wife. And I met her basically like the first day I was there. And I liked her. We got along, all that stuff. So she was actually in my nursing class with me throughout all of nursing school. She was there with me, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I think in this Christian school environment, this is where my faith really got challenged as a Christian. Something I forgot to mention earlier, when I was about 7 years old, I did accept Jesus as my Savior. My parents raised me Christian. I accepted Jesus at that time. But going through high school and all that stuff, I fell away. I wasn't really taking it seriously. And I wasn't sure what I believed myself. So that's where I was when I was going into school at Simpson. And yeah, slowly as I was there, I began to become more confident in my faith. And I think that was for a variety of reasons. I think that when I started dating my now wife, then girlfriend, she was guiding me in a lot of ways that were healthy and good. The environment that I was put in there with like going to chapel, worship, all this stuff, that was good for me as well. And all this stuff kind of forced me to look into my faith much more in depth than I ever had. And I started to discover these things about Christianity that were blowing my mind, that truly convinced me of its truth. These are things like the fact that the Old Testament prophecies about Jesus that were written hundreds of years before Jesus ever existed were fulfilled by Jesus. And we have the manuscripts of those older texts that were written way, way before it happened. So that's interesting. There's lots of prophecies like that in the Bible. And then I just looked around at the people that were around me, the Christian people, and I was like, these are good people. Like they have something figured out. Treating people with respect. They are generous, wise, and kind, which I had always known. I grew up in the church, and my church was like that. I'm not one of those people that has like bad experiences with church or anything like that. But yeah, so my faith was growing. My relationship with my girlfriend at the time was growing. And then I was also growing professionally as a nurse, learning to be a nurse, all that stuff that comes along with that. And yeah, I end up graduating. And shortly after that, my fiance and I get married. And that kind of brings us to where we are today. We've been working as nurses, both of us, for close to 2 years now, having a good time.
Favorite nursing duo?
I would hope so. Yeah. And then as far as, the reason that I went into making this podcast recently, I was feeling this calling from God to use a gift of teaching, which teaching was not a spiritual gift that I ever really thought that I had. I never considered myself to be a teacher or somebody that is skilled at that. But this is what I was hearing from God. Over time, I feel like I have a pretty good discernment of like what God is telling me. He doesn't speak to me often, but when he does, I can tell what he's saying. And yeah, I felt very called to start this, and specifically to help men that may be facing similar challenges to what I faced throughout my life. Also wanted to mention, I've been porn free for several years now, and weed free, and that stuff. So praise God for that. Yeah.
Praise God. I can't claim the same, but good for you.
Hey, I mean, everyone has different struggles, and my relationship with weed was definitely an addictive one, which, might not be the same for you. So that's my testimony.
Well, thank you for taking your time to share all of that. I guess it's time for me to go into my testimony. So,
Sir.
Genesis, born and raised Woodland, California. I think I've said this before. My parents are pastors. My dad is more formally a pastor, but I believe through our congregation, the title is given to the spouse of the pastor. So technically, both my parents are pastors. My mom is an educator otherwise. And I mean, my dad has picked up jobs here and there just because pastoring by itself cannot pay the bills. So he's always been type of guy who's worked multiple jobs just to support me and my siblings. I have 3 older sisters, which is so fun. I loved being the youngest and the only boy, and I'm totally not being ironic at all about that statement. But I would say similar to Robbie, I feel like for the most part, my childhood was fine. I had some struggles, I think mostly with my siblings when I was younger. A couple of my older sisters really liked being physically dominant, so I got low-key tortured here and there, which is all fine and dandy. My sister still thinks I should go to therapy about it. I think I'm fine, but
It's water under the bridge.
Yeah, it's water under the bridge. But like, it was just kind of like similar stuff that you would expect from like older brothers treating younger siblings, kind of a thing. I got tied to trees. I got burned a couple of times. Definitely got hit a lot. Not necessarily unwarranted, considering I was a bit of a demon child. I was free-spirited, one might say. I've always been mischievous and getting myself into trouble. Still a little mischievous to this day, but not quite as much of a troublemaker. Stayed in the same school through elementary school. Definitely did pretty well socially. I have a lot of friends from elementary school that I still keep up to this day. I still have a lot of friends from middle school and high school that I still keep up to this day, which I'm very thankful for. But I think what was most interesting socially was I did get bullied a lot. I was bullied pretty much through, considering the start from my sisters, what they did to me was definitely bullying. There's no really sugarcoating that. Through middle school as well, I think that was the worst of it. High school was fine. High school, for the most part, like maybe after freshman year, I was pretty chill and I didn't really have issues with that. But I did struggle a lot with that because I was a really easy target. So it was really prolific. Before, when I was younger, I was a late bloomer. So I was really short. I was like the shortest person out of like all my friends by like a decent margin,
I
especially
remember
comparing
that.
myself to Robbie. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially because Robbie's always been tall. I was like half his height. I was also really skinny, so easily one of the smallest kids around by a pretty good margin, which made me a pretty easy target. Friends of mine, or I guess people who I thought were friends of mine at the time, that would physically bully me. I would get picked on a lot. You know, A, B, and C, just whatever things that they could throw my way to make themselves feel better. It was really difficult because I didn't really feel like I was getting support from home, because if I go back to my older sisters are also ones that bullied me. So I was like, cool, I didn't have that. I had a little bit of issues with my parents at the time as well. There was a time where I had felt very betrayed by my dad during this. I think this was in middle school. I was like opening up to him about how I felt bullied and everything. But I stemmed it back to one of my sisters, and I gave an example of, oh, and I think part of the reason is because my sister does A, B, and C against me. And I don't really blame my dad for this. He knew that me and this particular sister had a lot of issues. We were always at each other's throats for like no reason. So once he heard me throw blame in her direction, he just discounted everything that I said. And it was like, you just need to get over this. You need to man up. Like, you're just blaming your sister for no reason, blah, blah, blah. So at that time, after everything had gone down, been feeling very alone for like the longest time. I'd say through middle school and through a lot of high school, I had like a really heavy sense of isolation because I felt that people around me didn't really know like the things I had gone through. It was obviously very difficult for me to express it, considering A, I was a man, and B, at home, it was already difficult to express anything, and I wasn't going to really bring this to any of my friends. I wasn't really at that point where I'd really open up. And even within the church setting, it was difficult as well. I have a background in a Pentecostal church, so lots of kind of spiritual gifts and ideas thrown around a lot. One of them was the gift of prophecy. There was multiple prophecies that I had been given by people saying all these things about how amazing I was going to turn out, how I was going to be a leader of the people of my generation, how I was going to be a ground shaker.
I believe it.
But honestly, we'll see about that. But that isolated me even more. That made me feel, I mean, well, A, I didn't really believe it. It was really difficult for me to think that I had influence and power, like in a good way. I just wanted to stick to myself. Like, I just felt like, again, like I couldn't really be understood. Like, I couldn't really open myself up the ways I wanted to. And all I really did was kind of like take hits and just like stay in fetal position, so to speak, and just kind of stay safe.
And when you were feeling isolated like that, what were, like, do you have any, or did you have any defense mechanisms that you kind of like fell back on at the time?
I think in terms of like coping, like I just slept all the time. Like I felt so unmotivated and depressed by everything that I stayed in bed frequently, and I just was not motivated to do like anything at all. Middle school was really difficult for me academically. I'm not in the sense that like I didn't feel like I could perform well, but I just didn't want to. I've been sent to like the school counselors multiple times because I just showed little to no motivation in classes. My parents were aware of this. You know, my parents were fine overall, like trying to be supportive, but nothing really got through to me. In the end, like, I mean, it took really just a long time before I could find any real motivation to do anything. I feel like through my entire public school career, like going all the way through, like up until the end of high school, the only things I lived for were like hanging out with friends and playing video games. And that was it. Any other time,
Feel that?
I was isolating myself and just like not really doing anything. I was not exposed to really, like, I mean, I did indulge in like pornography. I think I started like early high school. It wasn't like a crazy big issue for me though. Didn't really indulge. I didn't really get like exposed to any form of drugs or anything until like later in high school. But even then, like I wasn't like actively involved, and that was only like maybe a once a week sort of a thing. So the main issue was the internal turmoil. I always had this idea in my head. You always look at media, you look at like TV shows, movies, like a big one's kind of like anime. You think of this person who is gifted with all this power and all this opportunity, and you always think to yourself, like, man, if only I was born special, then I would totally feel motivated to do all these things. I would be living up to my greatest potential ever if only I was given that special anointing in the first place. What I hadn't realized is that I had been anointed all along. I feel like every one of us has a special anointment like that, that we all should work and strive towards. But, like physically and mentally, I was just weak. I was small and frail, and that was reflected in some of my relationships. It was reflected to me back in the mirror and in my own brain. I used to literally stand in front of the mirror and tell myself, like, oh, I can never do A, B, and C. Like, that's just not in the cards. You're not that person. You'll never be that guy. It's really harsh. I don't know why I did that, but that's just how I was feeling. I was just like emo as heck.
That's similar for me. I definitely had similar experiences, like comparing myself to others, feeling like I could never do what other people have done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would just see people doing amazing things all the time. I think one of the things is you don't realize, especially something that's really difficult with modern cultures, you don't realize how much time and work is spent behind the grand reveal of whatever somebody's doing. You go on social media, you see people posting these paintings or these videos of them playing music or doing all these crazy things. You don't understand the dedicated years behind like that coming to being. And you think, I can never do something like that because like it really is like beyond many of our scopes as we are now. But one of the things I eventually had to realize for myself was I had to stop living for the now. That's all I did. I did the bare minimum in school. I did the bare minimum pretty much everywhere else except for gaming. I was a pretty good gamer. Maybe if I really went into that, I could become
don't
professional.
Don't downplay yourself. You were not a pretty good gamer. You were arguably like professional tier.
Well, yeah, not anymore. Those days are gone, and I'm okay with that.
Not anymore, but
yeah, it's fine. But it's one of those things that over time, I just became increasingly more and more dissatisfied with myself. And ultimately, like there wasn't really like a big moment or any one singular thing that happened that made me change and completely, flip a 180 on learning of my own potentials and what I could do. I think one of the first few things was also similar to Robbie, was getting into the gym. Getting into the gym was not something that I did immediately because it was like, I'm going to completely change my life. Like, this is going to be the turning moment. This is going to be like the end all. It's something I did for fun, actually. Like, I just had a lot of friends, and I even had like some other mentors in my life that were really into the gym, and they just kept hounding me about, it's like so much fun. You get to see so much progress. You'll look better. You'll feel better. Healthy body's a healthy mind. I was like, sure, yeah, I'll give it a try. I started going to the gym with friends a lot. If I didn't have friends to go with me and to make it enjoyable, I would have never gotten there in the first place. And since being in the gym, let's see, when I was senior, I was 18 years old, 5'11". I was 112 pounds. That's how skinny I was. I was pretty much that skinny my entire life. I was insane. Sitting now, I'm 24. I'm around like 165. The most I've weighed is 175. I plan on bumping that up to like 180 within the next year. And it's not just the singular purpose of just getting bigger, but it's just I found something that I enjoyed and that people in my life who loved me helped me develop these skills and these things, and I was able to see tangible progress, and it really helped change my view about how I can start working for myself and being a better version of myself, not just for my own personal gain, but for others. That's also what really helped me see the value in the relationships I had fostered. I think that was like the one good thing I had done up through high school was creating and maintaining relationships with good people. I have a lot of people in my life that I'm very grateful for and that I still keep in contact with that have pushed me and loved me to do these things. And I am more grateful than they will ever know. That's why I talk about, in this podcast, I always refer to how important it is to maintain your relationships. That's my number one thing. That's my number one motivator. Once I had found that, then there was the next thing that I wanted to go on to, which was music. I started picking up the guitar and playing that. was very lucky that my father is a great musician. He plays multiple instruments and has a lot of knowledge. And so with that background, I used to go from watching guitar players from like the 80s just shred the heck out of a Les Paul or whatever. I'm like, oh, I could never do something like that. Like I watch those guys and I'd be so envious. I'm like, I can never get to that level. And I'm not at that level right now, but like I'm getting closer to that. And I'm also just developing skills with music that I never thought I would want or enjoy in the first place. It really was just about fostering these relationships with people that helped me go to these heights, academically. Honestly, I didn't even try through community college either. I was very much a bare minimum to get like a B kind of a guy. I had always known that I wanted to go into engineering because I was told engineering's good for job prospects, and I've always been good at maths and science. So I just went through that. But then once I got out of community college and I went to a state school, started meeting all these people who were really passionate about the things that they were doing. And they helped me more. They helped foster my abilities and my mind and help me perform really well in academia. All these things, everything that I've gained, not only just from people, but through the teachings that I had in the church growing up. If I had not been patient with people, if I had not loved them unconditionally, if I had not turned the other cheek, if I hadn't put up walls and kept people away, I would not be anywhere close to where I am. I am a culmination of other people's loves and desires and knowledge and skills that I hope to keep and maintain and grow off of.
And with your Christian faith, would you say that it's something that you've been confident in for a long time, like since your childhood, or did you have periods of doubt with it?
I had like maybe small periods of doubt. The main thing that stuck with me ever since I was a kid is, everybody always, like a lot of non-Christians will ask the question about, why doesn't God just make himself known? Why doesn't he just like prove that he's here all the time and he's the creator and he's divine and everything? And, one thing that I was taught religiously, one might say, was, the idea that we are led by faith. We are not led by things that are just supposed to be made plain and clear. Like this is not like one-off plan where everything's supposed to go exactly one way. This is a life built on choices and growth and different paths. Ultimately, those are things you have to fabricate for your own. If God made himself known, then there'd just be one thing everybody's going for, and that's not like there's no individuality, there's no personal development. And that's ultimately what we need to prove ourselves as Christians. I've always been led by faith. I've never really doubted God's existence. I've entertained ideas that could potentially disprove him. I've never been fully convinced otherwise. I will say that the church environment, I think, has made me struggle more than my relationship with God himself. Back to the isolation thing. One thing that's very common for Christians is having God speak to you and guide you and show you things. If I'm being honest, I've never profoundly heard a clear statement from God before. I've not been driven by anything like that. I've been driven by following his word and his teachings and just seeing all the things that I've gained from that path. And that's how I know to be led by faith.
I don't want you to feel like it's not a good thing that you haven't heard the clear voice of God or like been pushed, felt that push from God to do something.
Yeah.
That's just how God is speaking to you, is through his word.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, everyone's walk with Christ is different. But as a kid, that was another thing that was actually really isolating for me, was I was around so many people that could hear him as clear as day. And it always made me think, why am I not hearing him? Like, what's going on? Am I not good enough? Does he just not have anything for me? Yada, yada, yada. It made my relationship with him maybe not the best, but it never made me stop believing. It was just something that, again, everything I just had to work through. But again, once I saw the fruit of the Christian path that I walked, then I could see, the messages that were laden for me. And now here I am, college graduate with an electrical engineering degree. Hopefully I have good prospects.
Let's go.
It's pretty much, yeah. That's pretty much my testimony. I feel like ever since, mostly like getting through public school was the most difficult, but at the end there is when I started really seeing what I could be and who I am in Christ. Ever since then, like, I feel like my life's been steadily getting better and better.
Sure, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing all that stuff. I know it's tough to share certain things, especially like a lot of these
Tough
things.
to open up as a man.
Yeah, no, for real. But like some of these things, most of these things, we probably haven't talked about in a long time. We don't talk about them very often because it's not very often that you're asked to give your testimony. But I think it's a very powerful thing. And I think that there's a lot of people that will relate to you and relate to me in different ways.
I hope so.
And so, yeah, as for everyone listening, I hope that you've taken something that applies to you. Maybe you're going through some of the struggles that we went through in the past, whether it's porn, feeling isolated, substance abuse, lack of self-confidence. Yeah, just know that we were right there in the same place where you are. So thank you all for joining us. Please send us your thoughts, suggestions, and criticisms at masculinespiritpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to continuing this journey together. Have a blessed day, everybody.
Blessed day.
Finding strength in submission, that's the mission. Breaking chains of tradition, new position. Walking in his vision, divine commission. This is masculine spirit, listen. Started as a boy with a heart full of questions, seeking validation through worldly possessions, learning wrong lessons about masculine expression. Depression hit heavy with painful suggestions that I wasn't worthy, wasn't making impressions, till I found his message and started progressing. Through every blessing and every testing, now I'm addressing the lies I was festering. Stand up, warrior, it's time to rise. Let his light shine through your eyes. Every battle makes you rise. This is where your spirit flies. Yeah, this is where your spirit flies. See, the thing about manhood, it isn't in muscles, though I built them daily through physical struggles, deeper than hustles and temporary puzzles. Spirit was muzzled till Christ came to shuffle my priorities, showing me purpose is foundational, rational, factual, but still inspirational, national, global, yet still congregational, building generational wisdom, that's operation. Finding strength in submission, that's the mission. Breaking chains of tradition, new position. Walking in this vision, divine commission. This is masculine spirit, listen. Biblical principles, giving me clarity. Carrying wisdom through all this disparity. Apparently strength isn't measured in scarcity. Rapid with charity, prayer, sincerity. Finding the warrior spirit inside of me, guided by a light that was hiding inside of me. Pride had to die for this ride to be righteous. See, Christ had to rise for this life to be bright in me. Sometimes we fall. Sometimes we crawl. But through it all, we hear his call. Building walls, standing tall, breaking falls, for our brothers. Yeah. Brothers, we stronger when walking together. Whether the weather is stormy or better, we measure our treasure in spiritual leather and never say never to heavenly preference. Learning to lead when we're serving the least of us. Freeing the beast while releasing the priest in us. Seeking increase while the feeder was keeping us. Chained to beliefs that are deeply deceiving us. Stand up, warrior, it's time to shine. Let your light lead down the line. Every brother by design. This is where our spirits climb. This is where our spirits stand as a beacon for the brothers still seeking. Show them strength isn't weakness when you're down on your knees. Every trial that tested me, every mile that pressed in me, built the man God blessed in me. Now I'm walking in destiny.